In a world where discrimination sometimes happens unintentionally, sometimes a small act can change a life. The story below is about an elderly man who has experienced many ups and downs in life, but it is the unexpected challenges that give him the opportunity to change not only himself, but also deeply affect the people around him. The black man named James Ellison, an old man but still lucid and active. During his younger years, he experienced many hardships and challenges. Born into a poor family, he always faced racism and injustice from society. However, he never gave up his desire to help the community and bring positive changes to those around him. The old man had a simple appearance, nothing outstanding compared to other rich or powerful people. He usually wore a simple shirt, dark trousers, and old leather shoes. However, his eyes exuded wisdom and experience through long and challenging days. His hair was silver, but his warm smile and eyes that sparkled with faith in humanity always warmed the hearts of those who came into contact with him. Mr. James is the founder of a large charity organization, helping poor children and people with disabilities. His organization has become a symbol of compassion and sharing, with many practical activities helping thousands of families in difficult circumstances. However, he never promotes himself, does not like to be the center of attention, but only wants to bring change to the less fortunate. The story takes place in a luxury hotel located in the center of a large city. This is a famous hotel, specializing in serving high-class guests and often welcoming businessmen, politicians, and celebrities. The hotel has a modern design, with high-class rooms and high-class service. Mr. James Ellison arrived here after a long business trip from another city, wishing to have a quiet night's rest in a luxurious space where he could relax after a long day. Despite his humble appearance, James Ellison is an extremely influential person in the community. The charity he founded has received respect from many organizations and individuals. However, few people know about the important role he plays in creating social change and supporting those in need. He always lives a humble life and rarely puts himself in the spotlight. The old man chose this hotel because of its reputation for quality service and amenities. He also wanted to enjoy a relaxing night before continuing his charity activities the next day. But unexpectedly, what he received here was not what he expected. Little did anyone know that a small event in this hotel would open up an unexpected journey where values such as respect, forgiveness and social awareness would be challenged and clarified. As Mr. James Ellison entered the hotel lobby, the atmosphere around him seemed to change immediately. The chandeliers on the ceiling and the polished marble floors reflected his image, an elderly man with a slow but steady gait. Although his hair was gray, his eyes still radiated clarity and determination. Everything around him was bright, modern and luxurious, but he did not feel that it was too important. A comfortable room and a quiet space were enough for him. He approached the reception desk, where a young employee was sitting, looking impatiently at the computer screen. The receptionist was a man in his 30s, named Mark, wearing a neat uniform but seemed to be inattentive to the guests he served. Mr. James smiled and greeted, his voice slow and gentle. "Hello, I have a reservation. My name is James Ellison." Mark raised his head, glanced at him, then looked back down at his computer screen. After a second, he began typing without saying anything. A feeling of unwelcomeness crept into Mr. James's heart, but he remained calm. After a while, Mark stopped typing and looked up. "Sorry, sir, the system could not find any booking information under this name." Mr. James felt surprised and gently replied, "There must be some mistake. I made a reservation over the phone, under the name James Ellison." Mark glanced over the list on the computer again, his eyes flashing with impatience. Without a trace of apology, he coldly replied, "There's nothing more we can do, sir. Without a reservation, I'm afraid we can't provide you with a room." Mr. James felt a sense of surprise. A little disappointed, but he didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He quietly took out his phone to check the reservation information. Meanwhile, Mark continued to look at other documents, not paying any attention to him. Mark's indifference and disrespect made the atmosphere heavy, but Mr. James still tried to keep his composure, not wanting to make a fuss. As he dialed the hotel's customer service number, another employee, female and apparently on duty, walked over and looked at Mark. Without a word of greeting, she asked directly, "What happened?" Mark shrugged, not explaining much, then pointed at Mr. James. "This man does not have a reservation. I cannot help further." The female employee looked at Mr. James again, her eyes sweeping over his plain appearance. She curled her lips slightly, unable to hide her disdain. "You must be mistaken. We only accept guests with reservations. If there are no rooms available, we cannot help." Mr. James felt hurt. He knew that racism still existed in this society, but he did not expect to encounter such a situation right in a luxury hotel. The coldness, disrespect and insensitivity of both staff members made him feel like he was being lumped into an undeserving group of customers. Not wanting to make more noise or disturb the people around him, he just gently replied, "I will double-check the information and come back later." He turned and left without leaving a tip for the other staff in the area, even though they had not served him. The feeling of humiliation made him feel even more out of place in this luxurious space. He slowed his steps as he walked out of the hotel lobby, but he couldn't help but wonder, is it because I'm black? Or because I'm old? As Mr. James walked out of the hotel, darkness had fallen over the city. Feeling lost, the words of the staff still echoed in his head. They had not only rejected him, but also treated him as if he did not deserve to be here. The old man walked slowly, the feeling of not belonging here deepened. The story had only just begun, and unexpected things would happen later, when Mr. James's true identity was revealed. As Mr. James Ellison left the hotel, his steps were weighed down by the weight of injustice. Although he did not want to show his grief, his heart was filled with despair. He looked out the window, where the bright neon lights reflected on the rain-soaked pavement, but his mind was in another space, where the memories of discrimination had not yet faded. The old man had experienced many challenges in life. Born into a poor family, he grew up surrounded by prejudice and cold eyes. During his younger years, he not only had to fight poverty but also faced racism and unfair treatment. These were painful memories that he had tried to bury for many years. But today, when he faced the indifference and discrimination of young people in this luxury hotel, the old feelings came flooding back. Although he was the founder of a large, widely known and respected charity, in that moment he was just an old man, a black man forgotten by society. He wondered, am I invisible to them? Will they ever see me, see what I have done for this community? He recalled his early years as a charity worker. He had to fight against skepticism, fight to gain trust and funding for projects that helped poor children and the disabled. His long hours of hard work and dedication helped him build a strong organization that touched thousands of families. But all those achievements, all those tireless efforts, seemed worthless to those who viewed him through the simple eyes of age and skin color. They don't know me. They don't know who I am, the old man said to himself. Still, he didn't want to fall into resentment. He had long since learned to forgive and to overcome challenges with patience and kindness. But this time, he felt truly hurt. Mr. James stopped in a small park nearby, where a few people were still walking, breathing in the fresh night air. His hands clenched as he remembered the hotel clerk's words. No reservation. Can't help it. Their voices echoed in his mind, cold and disrespectful. The old man stood there for a long time, watching the trees swaying in the wind, trying to find peace in his mind. But the feeling of helplessness still haunted him. He knew that racism did not only exist in bad places, but sometimes it appeared in places where people thought it could not happen. It was the cruelty of a society that he had fought all his life, but still could not seem to change completely. Part of him feels tired, but the other part reminds him of why he started all this. His charity is not just a job, it is a mission. It is his way of dealing with the pain of the past, his way of affirming that people should not be judged by the color of their skin or their age. Even though he feels rejected today, he still believes that every action he takes will make a difference, no matter how small. As he turned back toward the hotel, a new determination was born in him. Even though they had rejected him, he would not let that break his faith in what was good. He continued walking, determined not to let today's discrimination change him. They will have to change, he thought to himself, telling himself that every time he was hurt, it was an opportunity to find inner strength. And he, even as an old man, would continue to fight for a more just world. After leaving the hotel, Mr. James Ellison wandered around the neighborhood for a while. The yellow streetlights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a lonely and quiet scene. Although he did not want this incident to spoil his mood, he still felt sad. He knew that he would have to find another place to rest, and that tomorrow, this would probably become a distant memory, washed away by the volunteer work he was always busy with. However, as he was preparing to leave the hotel area, an unexpected call from an unknown number completely changed the situation. While he was standing under a tree, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves, his phone suddenly vibrated. He picked it up and a female voice rang out, full of concern. "Hello, Mr. James, this is Claire from the hotel management department. I apologize for the inconvenience earlier. Have you already left the hotel?" Mr. James was surprised but calmly replied. "Yes, I just left. I didn't get the reception I expected." Claire's voice was a little awkward but very sincere. "We are very sorry about that incident. After checking the information, we realized there was a big misunderstanding. Mr. James, we actually did not know that you were the founder of the Ellison Foundation charity." At this, Mr. James was slightly surprised. These words made him feel a little strange. He could not help but think about the incident that had happened earlier. Did they only change their attitude when they knew who I was? He wondered. Claire continued, her voice now much softer. "We sincerely apologize for the disrespectful attitude of the staff earlier. In fact, after further investigation, we realized that you are a very influential person in the community and we would like to invite you back to the hotel. If possible, we would like to welcome you back now and make up for the recent incident." Mr. James was silent for a moment, not in a hurry to answer. A strange feeling arose in his heart. He had received an apology, but was it truly sincere or was it just because he knew his identity? Was this action a way to restore the hotel's public image? Part of him wanted to deny it, to keep walking away and never come back. But another part of him understood that there were times when you had to face the truth, to see if change was really happening. In the end, he decided to go back to the hotel. "Okay, I'll come back. But I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to be magnanimous. I just want to see how you'll treat me when you know who I am." Mr. James replied calmly, but there was a hint of coldness in his voice. A moment later, he returned to the hotel. This time, the scene around him seemed completely different from the last time. The receptionists had completely changed their attitudes. Mark, who had rejected him earlier, now stood at the reception desk, his face flushed red, showing embarrassment and regret. When he saw Mr. James enter, he quickly stood up, bowed his head, and said in a tone that was both apologetic and anxious, "I'm sorry, sir, I'm really sorry about the incident earlier. We didn't know you were the founder of the Ellison Foundation. We're honored to have you." Mr. James just looked at Mark for a moment, not responding immediately. His heart was currently in a turmoil, between the feeling of wanting to forgive and doubt. As soon as Mr. James entered the hotel lobby, another senior employee, Ms. Maria, the director of the customer service department, appeared. Ms. Maria was a middle-aged woman, with a powerful and elegant appearance. When she saw him, she immediately approached, bowed her head and said in a very sincere voice, "We are deeply sorry, Mr. James. No one here knew about you, and our failure to do so has caused you to suffer. We truly respect what you have contributed to the community. Please give us the opportunity to make this right." Mr. James felt a little warmed up, but his doubts were not gone. Mrs. Maria's apology seemed sincere, but there was still something in his heart that did not forgive immediately. He knew that the change in their attitude was not accidental. They only changed when they realized who he was. But was this an opportunity for them to truly learn a lesson about respect and fairness? Mr. James did not reply immediately. He just looked around, then stopped in front of Mrs. Maria, and said slowly, "I just want you to treat everyone fairly, not just because you know who they are. Respect should not come from fame or money, but from recognizing the value of each person." His words echoed throughout the hotel, causing everyone to fall silent for a moment. Maria bowed her head, silently accepting these words, while Mark and the other employees stood silently, as if reflecting on themselves. Mr. James walked up to the front desk, and this time, he was not only invited into the room with a sincere attitude, but also received a special invitation from the hotel manager. "We hope to cooperate with you in the Ellison Foundation's charity projects. We really respect what you have done." Although it was not easy to forgive immediately, Mr. James sensed that the opportunity for change had come. And he was not going to miss it. After the conversation with the customer service manager ended, Mr. James was led to his room. Although the hotel space was luxurious, with soft yellow lights, exquisite design and comfortable atmosphere, his heart was still full of thoughts. In the end, he could not deny that, although everything around him had changed, the feeling of being discriminated against still lingered in his mind. It was a feeling that was difficult to erase, no matter how hard the world around him tried to make up for it. But surprisingly, it doesn't end there. As soon as he entered the room and put down his luggage, a gentle knock came on the door. When he opened the door, standing before him was Ms. Maria, the customer service manager, along with Claire, who had called him earlier, and another employee he had never met before. Ms. Maria stood up and said, "We appreciate you returning to the hotel, Mr. James. However, we still feel we need to do more to show our respect and honor to you." Mr. James looked at the three of them, feeling a little confused but also touched by their sincerity. Mrs. Maria continued, her voice soft and firm. "We know that our actions today cannot fully make up for what happened earlier. However, I would like to say that we have decided to hold a special dinner to apologize to you. Please join us. We hope this will be an opportunity to rebuild trust and show our deep gratitude for your contributions." Mr. James did not expect that a luxury hotel would organize an evening of apology for him. This was a significant change from the initial cold attitude, and in his eyes, it was also a signal that people were truly realizing their mistakes. Mrs. Maria continued, "We also wanted to take another step to show our respect for the work he has done. We have been in touch with some of our partners and would like to partner with his Ellison Foundation on a major upcoming project. We hope he will agree to join us and give us the opportunity to contribute to the great efforts he is undertaking." The feeling of surprise in Mr. James's heart grew more and more. The initial feeling of rejection now turned into an opportunity he had never expected. However, he still couldn't deny that there was a part of him that felt uncomfortable thinking that their attitude would change only when they knew his identity. "I'm not here to receive compensation or rewards," James replied, his voice calm but troubled. "I just want people to understand that respect should not be given for fame or money. Respect is something each person must earn through his or her own actions." Hearing this, Mrs. Maria bowed her head and said nothing more. Claire, standing next to Mrs. Maria, seemed very sincere. "We understand that, Mr. James, and we're sorry we couldn't have realized it sooner. We just wish we could have done something to show that we're truly sorry and want to make things right." The new employee, a man in his mid-40s named Tom, stood quietly behind him. He stepped forward, holding a small gift box. "We don't know how to make up for our actions, but we hope this gift will show our appreciation," he said, handing the box to Mr. James. Mr. James took the box and opened it. Inside was a gold wristwatch, with his name engraved on the dial. This gift was not just a material thing, but an acknowledgement of the value they wanted to give him. Mr. James looked at his watch, then at the people in front of him. At this moment, he felt a real change in his heart, although he had not yet completely forgiven them. But in this moment, he realized that change, even if it was late, could still bring the opportunity to start over. "You are certainly trying very hard to make amends," Mr. James said, his voice softening a bit. "But I hope you will see others as well, not just me. People who have no voice like me. I hope that respect can be extended, not just to people like me, but to all the anonymous people who suffer from discrimination." Everyone in the room was silent. Mr. James's words were like a reminder, a lesson they could not ignore. After a moment of silence, Mrs. Maria smiled and nodded. "We promise to do what you say. We will not forget these words." James looked back at the employees before him. Despite his doubts, he knew this was a step toward changing their perceptions. And for him, forgiveness didn't always come immediately, but it had the opportunity to grow through practical actions and sincere words. "Okay," Mr. James said, his voice softer. "I'll be there that evening, but I hope it doesn't end with a party or a watch. If you really want to make a difference, start with real action." The three people standing before him nodded, realizing that even though they had taken the first step today, the road ahead was still long. But at least they had recognized and committed to correcting their mistakes. The next evening, a small banquet was held at the hotel in a simple yet formal manner. The banquet hall was spacious, the warm light from the crystal chandeliers reflected on the light beige walls, creating a cozy and elegant atmosphere. The round tables were covered with pure white tablecloths and decorated with fresh flower vases, making the room elegant and polite. The hotel had prepared a dinner party in the hope of making amends for their mistakes, and they wanted to let Mr. James feel the true respect. As Mr. James entered the banquet hall, the atmosphere changed immediately. The staff stood around, smiling, but their eyes were still somewhat reserved. They knew that tonight was not just a banquet, but also an important opportunity to show their sincerity and repentance. Mrs. Maria stood near the door, her face somewhat tense but also full of anticipation. "Hello, Mr. James," Maria said, her voice soft. "We appreciate you coming. I know this event can never make up for what happened, but we hope you will see our sincerity." Mr. James nodded, but said nothing. He had had time to think and prepare for this meeting. Part of him felt that forgiveness was near, but another part of him still doubted that there had been real change in their hearts. Still, he did not want to just look at the mistakes, but wanted to see more concrete actions to prove that change. Maria continued to invite him to sit down. The hotel staff approached one by one, each with sincere apologies. However, what touched him the most was not the gifts or the empty words, but the sincerity in their eyes. It seemed that they were not just apologizing for the incident, but truly understanding that treating people with respect was a lesson that should be remembered forever. After a while, Mrs. Maria invited Mr. James to the small stage in the banquet hall. Everyone in the room was silent, waiting for what would happen next. Mr. James stood in front of the crowd, feeling the space shrink. His eyes swept over the familiar faces, all of them looking at him with sincere eyes, without any signs of shyness or fear. Mrs. Maria stepped up beside him, her voice warm but full of seriousness. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are hosting this dinner today to apologize to Mr. James Ellison, a man we deeply respect but who was treated unfairly right at our hotel. What Mr. James has done for the community is immeasurable. The Ellison Foundation has changed the lives of thousands of people, and we are truly grateful to him." At this moment, all eyes turned to Mr. James, a long moment of silence. He stood there, feeling the sincerity in each of Mrs. Maria's words, but what touched him the most was not the praise about himself, but the recognition that he had longed for from those around him. Mr. James smiled, bowed his head slightly, and said, "Your words are truly touching, but I don't need any praise or gifts. I just want to say that everything I do is not for fame or personal gain, but because I believe that every human being deserves to be treated fairly and with respect." And I hope that this hotel will remember that not only when facing me, but also when facing everyone." His words rang out as a reminder of fairness and respect. Maria and the other staff listened, their eyes lighting up, as if those words had truly touched their hearts. A moment of silence passed, and then there was applause from the audience. Somewhere within them, they understood that change comes not just from recognizing mistakes, but from committing to change in real action. Claire, who had called Mr. James yesterday, also approached and said to him, "We will not forget what you said tonight. And I hope that we can continue to learn from you, to not only correct mistakes but actually create a more respectful environment for everyone." Mr. James looked at her, his eyes still warm, but he couldn't help but be a little touched by the sincerity she had shown. He understood that even though things might not be perfect, at least they had realized it and were trying to fix it. As the party continued, the conversations became more relaxed, and the atmosphere in the room gradually became friendly. Mr. James felt less tense. Although he still maintained that change must be demonstrated through action, he could not deny that their efforts, however flawed, made him feel appreciated. Finally, Mr. James stood up, looked around and said a short sentence. "Let's start over here. Together, we can make this world a better place, starting with the smallest of actions." His words were not just the end of the evening, but a prelude to positive changes to come. The people in the banquet room, despite their worries, could see a new hope. And for Mr. James, it was a meaningful moment, not because of forgiveness, but because they learned a valuable lesson about respect and fairness. After the party ended, the atmosphere in the banquet hall gradually became lighter. The tension had been released, and conversations began to open up. However, one question still lingered in the minds of many: why did Mr. James do all of this? Why did he establish the Ellison Foundation? Maria, unable to hide her curiosity, approached James as the party wound down. She invited him out onto the hotel balcony, where the space was airy and quiet, to continue their conversation. They stood side by side, looking out at the night city, its lights flickering on the water of the nearby rivers. "Mr. James," Maria began, her voice soft, "I can't help but be curious about your charity. How did you come to start such a great undertaking? One that could change the lives of thousands of people?" Mr. James smiled, looking off into the distance, his eyes seemingly lost in a distant memory. "The Ellison Foundation is not an organization that I came up with overnight. It is the result of a lifetime, a challenging journey that I have gone through." Maria sat down on the bench beside him, listening attentively. James took a deep breath and began to tell his story. "As a child, I grew up in a poor neighborhood in New Orleans. My mother was a strong woman, but she struggled to raise 3 children on her own. I remember the nights she would stay up late, working hard just to make sure we had enough to eat. She taught me that no matter how hard life was, I had to keep my dignity and never let my circumstances determine my fate." He paused, his eyes shining with painful memories, but also with pride. "When I grew up and started to take care of myself, I realized that there were many people, especially children, who were not as fortunate as I was. They lacked opportunities, conditions to change their lives. And I wanted to do something to help them." Maria listened with sympathy, not expecting the story behind the Ellison Foundation to come from such a big heart. James continued, his voice thoughtful. "In 1985, when I had a little financial stability, I decided to establish the Ellison Foundation. My initial goal was very simple: to help children in difficult circumstances, especially abandoned children, without families, without a future. I wanted them to have the opportunity to study, to be able to rise in life. I know that if they have the opportunity, if they get the right education, they can change their lives, not only for themselves but for the community around them," he stressed, his eyes full of determination. Maria was surprised to realize that Mr. James's work was not just an ordinary charity but a quiet, persistent revolution in changing destinies. She felt a deep respect for him. "So what did you do to help them?" Maria asked, her voice filled with admiration. Mr. James chuckled, we not only provide scholarships, but also create vocational training programs, job support, and most importantly, build a mental support network for those who need it. I don't want to just give superficial help, I want to create a system that can help them stand up for themselves, start their own businesses, and become useful citizens to society. Over the years, the Ellison Foundation has helped thousands of children, not only with their education, but also with their life skills, self-confidence, and ability to overcome challenges. His organization has not only changed the lives of children, but also created a stronger, more connected community. This has become his mission, and he never stops working, even though he sometimes feels tired and discouraged. But Mr. James continued, his eyes becoming thoughtful, the hardships of the children I help are the same hardships I have experienced. They not only lack material things but also lack confidence, lack of belief in themselves. And that is what I want to give them, so that they do not feel alone in this world. He paused, his voice softening. It's important to help them realize that, no matter how difficult their circumstances, they have the right to be respected and loved. And I hope that one day, when those children grow up, they will come back and help the next generation. Maria was silent, moved by his story. She understood that, although Mr. James had created a large charity, it was his kindness and belief in the power of people that had truly made a huge difference in the community. He had not only helped the children with material things, but he had given them something even more precious, hope and self-belief. Mr. James, Maria said, her voice trembling with emotion. I can't imagine the struggles you've had to endure to make all of this happen. And I'm truly honored to meet you today. You're a truly special person. Mr. James smiled, his eyes warm but humble. I only do what I can, Maria. I only hope that what I do can create small, but sustainable changes. And I believe that, if we all work together, we can make this world a better place. Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude for him. Not just for the successes he had achieved, but for the values he had instilled, the lessons of kindness, perseverance and respect for others. She knew that, from this day forward, her work would not be just a job, but part of a larger mission, where respect and kindness were the solid foundation for all actions. After her emotional conversation with Mr. James, Maria returned to her office with a heavy heart. She felt more responsible than ever, but also understood that this was an opportunity to change not only the way the hotel operated, but also a step forward in demonstrating respect and kindness in every action. The next day, Mrs. Maria held an emergency meeting with the hotel's senior staff. In the luxurious conference room, the hotel's leaders sat solemnly, and the atmosphere was somewhat tense when Mrs. Maria entered, her face full of determination. We made a serious mistake. Maria began, her voice serious and responsible. Our actions toward Mr. James were not only disrespectful to a customer, but also ignorant of the values behind his name. I had the opportunity to speak with him, and it was clear to me that Mr. James was a special person who had dedicated his life to helping the community. The staff in the room were silent, listening to every word Mrs. Maria said. She continued. We cannot continue to operate this way, especially when we are managing a luxury hotel where human values and respect are at the core of our business. Therefore, I have decided to conduct a refresher training program for all employees on respect, empathy, and how to recognize individuals who have a profound impact on society like Mr. James. Maria looked at each person, making sure they understood the situation. Today, we are going to start a big change. Employees must be educated about diversity, about not judging people based on their appearance or social background. We are not just a hotel, we are part of a community, and it is our responsibility to create a space where everyone feels welcome, no matter who they are. A senior manager stood up, his face looking worried. But can we completely change the process in such a short time? It might be difficult for employees to change their attitudes. Maria replied firmly, change is never easy, but it is necessary. I will personally participate in this training process and will check in periodically to make sure we are not just talking but actually doing. After the meeting, senior staff began to plan the details of the training program. Maria requested that human rights and diversity experts come in to deliver the training, and that staff who did not participate in the program would not be allowed to work with clients. She knew that only when the entire staff understood the importance of respect and inclusion would real change occur. Meanwhile, Mr. James remained at the hotel, waiting. Although he had received an invitation to return, he was still unclear about the hotel's determination to change. But when he saw Mrs. Maria enter the room, her face full of sincerity, he sensed a real change. "We are very sorry for what happened earlier, Mr. James," Maria said, this time with more sincerity than ever. "And I want to apologize again. But I also want to say that we have learned a lot from you and from what you represent. Our hotel will change. We will not be just a place to stay, but a place that truly welcomes everyone." Mr. James looked at Mrs. Maria, then at the staff standing around, his eyes filled with emotion. He knew that their apology was not just empty words, but a real commitment to change. "Thank you, Maria," Mr. James said, his voice deep and warm. "I know change isn't easy. But your actions today have shown me that you care about doing the right thing, and that's what matters most." Maria and James shook hands, and in that moment, they both knew that together they had created a turning point not only for the hotel but also for the community. The change in perception of the hotel was not just a strategic move, but a real commitment to building a welcoming, respectful and inclusive environment. The hotel staff then began to make the necessary changes. Training sessions on respect, diversity and empathy were held regularly, and all the important lessons about human rights and respect for differences were integrated into the customer service process. These actions made the hotel not only a luxury accommodation, but also a model of how to build a work environment and customer service based on respect and humanity. The hotel, after this transformation, has become a special destination not only for its luxury but also for the spirit of solidarity and kindness it brings. Guests who come here not only enjoy the luxurious amenities, but also experience a sincere welcome, something that Mr. James himself helped create. The next day, Mr. James and Mrs. Maria sat chatting in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. The morning light streamed in through the large windows, making the space feel warm and peaceful. Their conversation today was no longer about a breakup or conflict, but a dialogue between two people who shared a vision of a better world. Mr. James felt satisfied to see the changes in the hotel, and Mrs. Maria felt the power of patience and empathy. "Things can change, but it's important to realize that change starts with small actions," said James, his eyes lighting up as he recalled the long journey of building his charity. "The world will only change if each of us is willing to face our mistakes and learn from them. I'm glad your hotel is doing that." Mrs. Maria nodded, her eyes shining with faith and determination. "We have learned a lot from you, Mr. James. Yesterday, we saw that it was not only a lesson in respect, but also a lesson in self-respect. We will not only serve our customers with the best service, but also with sincerity and kindness." James' story inspired everyone in the hotel. Under Maria's leadership, the staff began to work with a new mindset, not just seeing customers as consumers, but as people worthy of respect, with their own unique stories, values and contributions. Training sessions not only taught respect, but also helped each employee recognize the value of empathy, listening and compassion. Hotels are becoming known not only for their high-quality service, but also for the human values they bring. Guests feel the difference from the moment they step through the door. No longer are the elderly looked down upon or the disadvantaged abandoned. Everyone feels welcome and appreciated. As for James, he continues his work with the charity, helping disadvantaged communities and supporting those who need a chance to change their lives. He is not only the founder of the organization, but also a symbol of resilience and kindness. His story and actions are a testament to the fact that change is possible if we dare to face mistakes, learn and move forward. On the last day he left the hotel, Mrs. Maria saw him off with a sincere smile. "Thank you for giving us the chance to change, Mr. James. We will never forget this lesson." Mr. James smiled, looking at Mrs. Maria and then at the staff standing nearby, his eyes shining. I hope you always keep this vision. The world needs people like you, people who respect and appreciate people, no matter who they are. As Mr. James stepped out of the hotel, a gentle breeze blew by, carrying a message of change and hope. And from then on, the hotel became not just a place to stay, but also a destination of empathy, of strong human values. Every employee there, from Mrs. Maria to the waiters, understood clearly that change, no matter how small, can create a great impact if it comes from a sincere heart and an open mind. We can all make a difference in the lives of others through small acts of kindness, respect, and compassion. Let's spread this story and support the noble values we want to see in society. If you find this story meaningful, please share it with your friends and family. Together, let's create a community where everyone is respected and loved. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories.